first I want to start off, this is going to be a very, very interactive talk, so I'm going to be asking the audience a lot of questions and answers, and we're going to let the flow of that guide the talk because it's mostly about you rather than what I'm going to present. So first of all, two parts. Star Trek fans, raise your hand. Star Wars fans, raise your hand. Anyone who watches both or likes both, raise your hand. And those who do not like either, raise your hand. May I ask why?
It's not my thing.
Fair enough. So with that in mind, what if the things that you studied as a child or growing up that you didn't like could make the difference in an engagement by actually getting someone to open up? For example, the person that may not like Star Wars or Star Trek but likes Firefly or Babylon 5. That could be the difference. Just knowing what you normally do not like, but taking a little bit of time to understand it can potentially open up those that are mostly closed. I wish Chris was here for this because this talk was greatly inspired by Chris Hadnagy as well as the Social Engineering Village. I actually saw someone give a talk on the cultural impacts of social engineering, and that actually gave the spark of idea for this. Because you are going to be encountering people from different cultures, ethnicities, and they'll have different values that they hold. So even the things that may not interest you as emphatically as other topics, that could be the difference between connecting with them. This is the clicker, right?
Nope, it's the other one.
Oh dear. Okay, so who I am. I'll be very honest with you. I didn't start in information technology. I was originally in international studies with a focus in world politics and diplomacy, minor in history. I graduated and I was like, what am I going to do for employment? They want TS clearances for someone who doesn't even have experience. How am I going to do this? So by luck, I did see a degree posting at University of Maryland for cybersecurity, so I took a leap of faith and dove right in. I started right in the SOC, went to compliance, did a little bit of red team work, a little bit of web app pen testing, and now I'm doing threat hunting at my current company. Usual disclaimers, I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, just very curious beginner. These are my opinions and mine alone, do not reflect that of my employer. And I do have a little bit of bias because I grew up exposed to multicultural environments. My parents are immigrants, and they brought with them a plethora of cultural nuances and perspectives, and that greatly influenced me growing up as a child. So and I'd rather have this evoke discussion and invite all of your perspectives as we go along. So what is this? The Renaissance approach. The definition of the Renaissance man or woman is a person who is well educated and sophisticated and has talent and knowledge in a variety of studies. One great classical historical example is Leonardo da Vinci. He was artist, scientist, musician, an inventor, and a writer. The basic philosophy of the Renaissance approach was, and the Renaissance man and woman, is one should try and embrace all knowledge and develop their own capacities as fully as possible, because then that gives perspective into other areas of study that you are actually focusing on. Don't do this with your pretext. Just run with one and just go straight into it without having a decent plan when you're on an engagement, because this is what's going to happen. They'll run away. Stubbornness does lead to failed engagements. Who remembers this in high school? World history, AP Euro, US? Okay, for those who aren't familiar with this, this was the methodology for the AP Euro exams, or the World History exams, the DBQs, the database questions. They would say, remember the acronym PERSIA: politics, economics, religion, social, intellectual, area or artistic, and near. If you want to add the N, be my guest. But this forms the basis of the Renaissance approach. I didn't realize it until much later, I put two and two together, that if I know a little bit in each, maybe that'll help reinforce discussion to those that are more that have expertise in all of these areas. And during my time in international studies, I saw a considerable amount of this, where someone would focus more on politics, but have a little bit of curiosity in economics, religion, and then if I asked questions harping on that, because my specialty was more on the intellectual and social side, then it would evoke even more understanding when they would be normally closed off to people asking them questions. Who's familiar with Grand Admiral Thrawn? Raise your hand. Anyone? What can you tell me about him?
Yeah, put me on the spot. Imperial General from a series of Star Wars books.
Okay, that's close enough. He is the considered one of the greatest strategists in the Star Wars expanded universe. He would, rather than traditional arrogance, he'd rather study his enemy and embrace the mantra, to defeat an enemy you must know them, not simply their battle tactics, but their history, philosophy, and art. He would take the art of certain worlds that he was looking to conquer and try to analyze the psychology, the psyche, in addition to other reports that he's had about the world. So he evokes the Renaissance approach in the Star Wars universe. And that's part of the reason why I said Star Wars and Star Trek. And for those Star Trek fans, I didn't forget about you. Can't say Captain Picard. So his variety, I'm pretty sure if you think about it now from the episodes that you've seen from Next Generation, how he leverages all these topics, his passions and disinterests, into a lot of negotiations. I'll give you an example. Anyone can give me an example where he's leveraged a variety of his love for tea, archaeology? Anyone?
Not off the top of my head.
Fair enough. I'll give one example. The Borg. The Borg, he got assimilated, and he leveraged a lot of these in dealing with him eventually. It's not exactly apparent, but indirectly he leveraged the knowledge he had to create data points that say, this is how I would deal with them, adapt before they can adapt, and so on. Is anyone familiar with who she is? Okay, so she is Orit Gadiesh. She is the chairwoman for Bain & Company. And she has taken the lead. She's championed the concept of an expert generalist. So with that being said, I believe that the Renaissance approach, employing it on a day-to-day basis, eventually leads to that tier of an expert generalist. And we will define that in a little bit. But Orit defines expert generalist as someone who has the ability and curiosity to master and collect expertise in many different disciplines, industries, skills, capabilities, countries, and topics. Kind of sounds like InfoSec for some people. These are some examples of those who've practiced the Renaissance approach and reached expert generalist status. I'm sure some of them are very familiar and others are a little more obscure. And Orit is there. As you can see, each of them have a tier of 3 that they leverage. The middle one could be their general stream for some of them. Others would have the left as their primary or the right as their primary. But the point is they always cycled around to reinforce a primary stack. Anyone know who Charlie Munger is, aside from being Warren Buffett's partner? Have anyone heard of Charlie Munger? Anyone? Okay. So you don't hear too much about Charlie Munger. You know, he's Warren Buffett's partner, but he studied microeconomics, psychology, law, mathematics, biology, and engineering to reinforce his knowledge of finance. And he came up with 2 distinct philosophies and models, the 2-track analysis and the usage of multiple models. This is more of the concept of the 2-track analysis and multiple models. So as we can see on the T, the primary, this is for each subject and topic we know in anything, falls under a T model. How much we know, the generalist part, and then the specialization part, how deep we go with that. And you have enough crossover to get an expert generalist. You can be expert in one thing, but have a generalist idea about other topics. That will reinforce those T models, and you can stack them on different topics. Let's take, for example, InfoSec people, raise their hands. All right, Chris, how about you tell me what your primary part in information security is? Your passion.
Currently right now?
Yes.
Threat hunting and
threat hunting.
Tools to do that.
And the other aspects of information security that you have worked with in the past, how do they reinforce threat hunting? Either not directly.
Mindset.
Exactly. The mindset is is the most important thing in cultivating throughout our careers, be it in information security or in life, because the mindset really what the mind can conceive and believe it will always achieve. So some of the benefits are more abilities to bluff. And Tomohisa, when he was giving his presentation at DEF CON 24, he touched upon something that was very profound to me. To understand both cultures, it garners deeper respect from the target towards the social engineer. So you quickly develop the rapport. One example would be when you go to a foreign country and you attempt to speak that language. To a native, that conveys that you're willing to learn. You're willing to become uncomfortable and bridge and generate that respect. And then for that, they would be grateful and extend their hand, usually. And creating something from nothing. That's one of the biggest challenges with pretexts and when you're on the spot and you feel the time constraints on the clock. This is where the benefit of the Renaissance approach comes from. You have to create some things from absolutely nothing. So here's a more graphic example. I would have said thank you, Chris, but he's not here. But the variety of topics you have here, you can slot into the second wheel and instead of having just one or two things to talk about. If your target does not like any of those two topics, you're a little out of luck in that case. But if you have enough, you can cycle through for a variety. You can craft your phishing emails to tailor to people's expectations using the right lingo for vishing. If you get someone on the phone while wearing our help desk and you start just casually chatting with them, see what they're passionate about, and then you can thread different topics as you're speaking with them, you would build a deeper connection with them. Or impersonation. If you can talk the talk and walk the walk as well, it'll help. Especially having a wheel of knowledge to leverage from. Has anyone heard of the ABN AMRO bank heist in 2007? Okay, so to this day, this man has not been caught, but he burgled safety deposit box at an ABN AMRO bank in Belgium, stealing diamonds and gems, about 120,000 carats. And he visited the bank during regular hours, and he overcame all the security equipment because he charmed the entire employee staff. He would bring chocolates, he would listen to them vent, and he was trusted enough to get the original keys to make copies and get information on where the diamonds were. There was no technical vector at all. Those are just a few examples of the Renaissance approach. How do you wish to use them? It's up to you. Some topics complement each other, others do not, but it's finding those dots that will make the difference. And remember, when you connect with someone on multiple levels, it solidifies the trust, authenticity you'd have with them because you get them, more or less. These are some recommended readings based on Persia, so feel free to take photos if you want to grab some books. Everyone good? Okay. Here's some recommended podcasts I'd add to that. Art of Charm, Social Engineer Podcast, Jocko Podcast, TED Radio Hour, Stuff You Should Know, Tim Fenris, and Unbreakable. So basically, in conclusion, the Renaissance approach enables you to generally become a human NMAP, or expert generalist eventually. It's a lifelong process. You can also bridge cultural differences. And it'll allow you to create pretext on the spot based on the knowledge that you have. But please use it for good, just like the Force. Or else. Oh, it's not done yet. This is what happens. And then you'll surrender. If you want to get in touch, my Twitter is the SciFox, my GitHub is Red Corsair, and then my email is thescifox@protonmail.com. Thank you, everyone. Any questions? Yes, Emily.
Well, you talked a lot about using culture and using these different types of knowledge, which helps better connect. But one of the pretexts I love to use is kind of being clueless and saying, oh, I don't know about this. Teach me more, tell me more. And so just in case, you don't know necessarily.
Yeah, it's very good to leverage that because people, generally in our natures, we love helping others. So that's a very good point. Yes, sir.
Do you know what the original, the initial pretext was on the guy who robbed the bank?
No, I can't say it wasn't in the reports.
Just curious how how do you crack that nut?
If I had to take a guess, it'd be chocolate.
I'd be surprised suspicious if somebody walked into a bank with a bunch of chocolate and just said, hey, let's talk. Okay.
It's someone's birthday, or the donuts does work when you're tailgating. Yes, so.
2 questions, if that's all right.
Sure.
First one is, how did he not get caught in like cameras?
Well, he was using a disguise the entire time.
Interesting. Okay. Second question. First of all, thank you for all that very good information. But good information if I want to be offensive and do something illegal. But how would I use all that knowledge to actually protect an organization?
So I'm glad you mentioned that. So going back to Thrawn's quote, to defeat an enemy, you must know them. Leveraging that mindset and thinking like that, the adversarial mindset is what allows you to help gauge your enemy. But truth be told, you are going to be playing a constant game of chess with every attacker and bad guy. So it's accepting that that mindset is going to be a part of your life and constantly thinking like the bad guy. And then you'd be able to, quote unquote, potentially predict where they may or may not be. It is not foolproof, but it does give more of a person a fighting chance. And no, I do not have statistics. Yes, because it's very difficult to break out of patterns. When you've been raised a certain way, it's very difficult to break out of patterns and idiosyncrasies. Any other questions?
What places have you traveled to for your personal experiences?
Well, I don't want to list off the countries I've been to because it is extensive. But I will say that playing the tourist part does not always help. Because now you see the vineyard vines pans and the big fanny packs and the gigantic cameras, and it just evokes a, oh my lord, I'm embarrassed. But it does help. Like for one country, I did travel to Brazil. They're very, I would say they are the social engineers. Like if you want to emulate someone, they can be very aggressive. They're very upfront, and they know just. I don't know how. I still haven't been able to put my finger on it, but they know how to create rapport very quickly. I've never felt uncomfortable with Brazilians at all.
It's a big smile.
Yes, the smile, the dance, and the food. The food does wonders. Anyone else? Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Stickers for your